The 1970s are no longer a chapter in a textbook. They are a script being dusted off, revised, and quietly rolled back onto the world stage. Inflation is not sneaking in through the back door anymore. It is standing in the living room, turning the thermostat up, and daring everyone to pretend nothing has changed. Prices rise, wages chase, savings shrink, and confidence erodes one grocery bill at a time. Most people sense something is wrong, but they cannot quite name it. They feel poorer even when their income goes up. They work harder, yet fall behind faster. That feeling is not imagination. It is the sound of an old economic machine warming back up. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The playbook that broke the global economy in the 1970s is back, and this time the exits are narrower, the debt is heavier, and the room is far more crowded. Back then, inflation was sparked by oil shocks, loose money, and political denial. Today, those same forces exist, but they are layered on top of decades of borrowed growth. The system did not just stumble into this moment. It was engineered here slowly, deliberately, and with applause. Inflation is not simply prices going up. It is money losing memory. Each unit of currency forgets what it used to buy. That forgetting spreads unevenly. Essentials feel it first. Food, rent, fuel, healthcare. The things you cannot stop buying rise faster than the official numbers admit. Meanwhile, assets inflate too. Stocks, real estate, anything that can absorb excess money swells, giving the illusion of wealth even as purchasing power drains away underneath. This is how inflation hides. It makes balance sheets look healthy while daily life grows tighter. In the 1970s, governments told citizens to be patient. Inflation was temporary. Transitory, before that word became fashionable again. Central banks hesitated. They feared unemployment more than inflation, so they fed the fire with easy money. The result was a decade of stagflation, where growth slowed, prices surged, and trust collapsed. It ended only when interest rates were driven so high they shattered the economy to save the currency. That cure worked, but it left scars that shaped the next 40 years. Now consider the present. Interest rates were held near zero for over a decade. Debt exploded quietly. Then all at once, governments borrowed. Corporations borrowed. Households borrowed. Markets learned to breathe cheap money like oxygen. When inflation finally surged, the response was sudden and violent. Rates rose at a pace not seen in generations. The message was clear. Inflation would be crushed. But here is the trap. The system is no longer built to survive that medicine. In the 1970s, government debt was manageable. Today, it is colossal. Raising rates now does not just slow inflation. It detonates balance sheets. Every increase multiplies interest costs across trillions in obligations. That pressure forces a choice no one wants to admit out loud. Either tolerate higher inflation, or trigger financial stress severe enough to break something big. This is the same dilemma policymakers faced decades ago, except the stakes are higher and the margin for error is thinner. Inflation feeds on psychology. Once people expect prices to rise, behavior changes. Workers demand higher wages. Companies raise prices preemptively. Governments spend more to cushion voters. Each action feels rational in isolation. Together, they form a loop that is brutally hard to stop. In the 1970s, that loop ran wild for years. Today, it is already forming, accelerated by instant information, social media outrage, and global supply chains that fracture under stress instead of flexing. There is also a geopolitical twist that did not exist before. Globalization once suppressed inflation by sending production to the cheapest corner of the world. That era is reversing. Supply chains are being rebuilt for security, not efficiency. Energy is being reshuffled. Trade blocs are hardening. When resilience replaces cheapness, prices rise by design. Inflation stops being a bug and becomes a feature of the new order. This is why the old playbook is so dangerous now. In the 1970s, inflation was a crisis to be solved. Today, it is a pressure valve. It quietly reduces the real value of debt. It shifts burdens without votes. It acts as an invisible tax that no legislature has to pass. The temptation to let it run is immense. The promise that it will be controlled later is always easy to make. People sense this. That is why faith in institutions is fraying. Why markets swing between euphoria and panic. Why everyone feels like the ground rules changed without notice. The past is not repeating exactly, but it is rhyming with a sharper edge. Inflation is no longer an episode. It is becoming a condition, and the longer it lingers, the more it reshapes behavior, policy, and power itself. The 1970s taught one hard lesson. Once inflation escapes, it does not politely return to its cage. It has to be forced back, and the cost of that force is always paid by someone. The only question left hanging in the air is who pays this time, and how long the system can pretend there is still a painless way out. Inflation does not just change prices, it changes incentives. It rewires decision-making from the household level all the way up to the state. When money loses reliability, people stop planning long-term. Saving feels foolish. Holding cash feels like decay. Spending now feels rational, even virtuous. This is how inflation eats the future first. It pulls demand forward, hollowing out tomorrow to survive today. In the 1970s, this mindset spread slowly. Today, it spreads at the speed of a swipe. Watch how behavior shifts. Consumers rush to buy before prices climb again. Companies raise prices not because costs rose, but because they expect costs to rise. Workers switch jobs aggressively, chasing higher pay, not loyalty. Governments expand subsidies and stimulus to calm unrest, even as those programs add fuel to the fire. Everyone is acting defensively. Yet the combined effect is escalation. Inflation feeds on anticipation as much as reality. Central banks sit at the center of this storm, pretending their tools are still precise. Rate hikes are blunt instruments. They slow borrowing, yes, but they also expose fragility. In a world saturated with debt, higher rates do not gently cool demand. They strain banks, freeze credit, and threaten sudden breaks. This creates a paradox. Fight inflation too hard, and you risk a crisis. Fight it too softly, and inflation entrenches itself. The 1970s ended with rates so high they broke the economy on purpose. Repeating that move today would ripple through systems far more leveraged and interconnected. This is where the idea of no escape begins to take shape. In the past, households could outrun inflation with higher yields on savings. Bonds paid enough to matter. Wages eventually caught up. Today, yields lag behind real price increases for long stretches. Wages chase inflation but rarely overtake it. The gap is filled with debt, credit cards, buy now pay later schemes, and financial stress that never makes the headlines until it explodes. Assets complicate the picture further. Inflation inflates asset prices, but unevenly. Those who own homes, stocks, or businesses may feel insulated. Those who rent or rely on wages alone feel crushed. This gap widens social tension. In the 1970s, this divide existed, but it was smaller. Today, asset ownership is highly concentrated. Inflation quietly redistributes wealth upward while advertising itself as a neutral force of nature. Governments know this. They also know voters feel it instinctively. So the messaging shifts. Inflation is blamed on external shocks, supply chains, wars, greed, anything but structural choices. These explanations contain fragments of truth, but they dodge the core issue. Inflation persists because the system depends on it to function without defaulting on its promises. Debt has grown faster than real productivity for decades. Inflation is the release valve that keeps the pressure from blowing everything apart at once. This is why the 1970s playbook is being reused selectively. Policymakers borrow the language of discipline while practicing delay. They talk tough, raise rates just enough to signal seriousness, then pivot the moment something breaks. Each rescue reinforces expectations. Markets learn that pain will be limited. Governments learn that inflation is less politically explosive than austerity. The cycle continues. The global dimension makes escape even harder. Currencies compete. If one country tightens too much while others inflate, capital flows punish the disciplined and reward the reckless. Cooperation sounds noble, but it fractures under national interest. In the 1970s, coordination was difficult. Today it is fragile by default. Every nation is managing its own pressures, demographics, and debts. Inflation becomes contagious, jumping borders through trade, energy, and capital markets. At the personal level, this environment trains people to think tactically, not strategically. How do I get through this month? How do I protect myself this year? Long-term planning fades. Retirement becomes abstract. Trust erodes. This is the hidden cost of persistent inflation. It is not just economic, it is cultural. It rewards speed over patience, leverage over prudence, and narrative over numbers. The uncomfortable realization is that there is no clean reset button. Cutting inflation without collateral damage requires time, restraint, and political pain. Those are in short supply. Letting inflation run reshapes society in quieter but deeper ways. Either path extracts a toll. The 1970s showed how long and grinding that toll can be. The present moment suggests the grind may be longer still, because the system has grown used to postponing consequences rather than absorbing them. This is not about predicting collapse tomorrow. It is about recognizing that the environment has changed in a way that rewards awareness and punishes denial. Inflation is not an event to wait out. It is a condition to navigate. And the longer it stays embedded, the more it dictates choices, closes doors, and narrows options until what once felt temporary begins to feel permanent. When inflation becomes permanent in the mind, it stops being measured in percentages and starts being felt as pressure. Pressure to move faster. Pressure to take risks. Pressure to accept things that would have seemed unacceptable in a stable world. This is where the 1970s left their deepest mark, not in charts, but in behavior. People stopped believing that doing the right thing financially would be rewarded. They learned instead to adapt, improvise, and hedge against a system that no longer kept its promises. That lesson is resurfacing now. You can see it in the normalization of side hustles, in the quiet assumption that one income is never enough, in the way financial advice has shifted from building to preserving. The culture adapts before policy does. By the time official narratives catch up, the damage has already been absorbed privately, household by household. The phrase "no escape" does not mean collapse is guaranteed. It means there is no painless path back to the old world. Low inflation, stable growth, rising real wages, and manageable debt cannot all coexist under current conditions. Something has to give. In the 1970s, it was growth and employment that suffered to restore price stability. Today, attempting the same cure risks breaking institutions that were never designed for sustained high rates and tight liquidity. So the system drifts. Inflation is talked down, managed around, tolerated in practice. Official targets become flexible. Definitions shift. The public is told to focus on averages while living with extremes. Over time, this erodes the credibility that money itself relies on. Currency is trust, formalized. When that trust weakens, people look for anchors elsewhere. Hard assets, foreign currencies, speculation. Anything that feels more solid than promises. History suggests this phase can last longer than anyone expects. The 1970s stretched across a decade, with multiple false dawns where inflation seemed beaten, only to roar back stronger. Each relapse made the final cure harsher. The risk now is not that inflation spikes once, but that it settles into a range that is high enough to distort everything, yet low enough to be politically survivable. That is the danger zone. The slow burn that never makes headlines but quietly reshapes lives. In that environment, inequality widens, not because of conspiracy, but because inflation is uneven by nature. Those closest to new money adapt fastest. Those farthest from it absorb the cost. This breeds resentment, polarization, and a sense that the system is rigged, even when no single villain can be named. The 1970s saw this tension explode into social unrest and political realignment. The present moment carries similar undercurrents, amplified by constant connectivity and shortened attention. Understanding this is not about fear. It is about clarity. Inflation rewards those who see it early and adjust thoughtfully. It punishes those who assume the past will reassert itself automatically. Stability is not a default setting. It is an outcome that requires discipline, sacrifice, and trust, all of which are harder to summon in a world already stretched thin. The uncomfortable takeaway is that waiting for a return to normal may be the riskiest strategy of all. Normal was built on conditions that no longer exist. Demographics have shifted. Debt has compounded. Global cooperation has frayed. The 1970s playbook is back because the underlying pressures never disappeared. They were deferred, diluted, and disguised until they could no longer be ignored. No escape does not mean no agency. It means the choices ahead involve trade-offs, not miracles. Inflation will either be confronted directly, with visible pain, or allowed to linger, with quieter damage. History shows that pretending there is a third option only extends the reckoning. The script is familiar, but the cast is larger and the stage more fragile. How this era is remembered will depend on whether societies choose to face the cost of stability or continue to pay the interest on delay.